Okay, welcome to the next Theology of the Body Educators webinar. These monthly ministry spotlights, spotlighting various ministries for marriages and families, trying to strengthen marriage and family. And today we're really blessed with Kelly Breaux from Redbird Ministries joining us to tell us about Redbird Ministries, which is a ministry grief support for child loss. So I'll introduce Kelly and then we'll begin the webinar. And there will be a time for question and answers at the end if you think of any question for Kelly that you want to write down and ask at the end. So Kelly Breaux has been married to her husband Ryan for 21 years, and they have 5 children. Estelle, 14 years old, and their little saints in heaven, Emma Grace, 3 years, 10 months, Talon Anton, sorry if I'm mispronouncing these, 15 days, Christian Ryan, and Eva Catherine. After Kelly and Ryan Breaux endured the losses of 4 children, the Breaux were astonished to find a dearth of resources to support bereaved parents. Over time, she and her husband were able to mend and restore their relationship and find healing centered on the sacraments of the Catholic Church. The Breaux found that their marriage had a ripple effect, bringing healing to their extended family and positively affecting their faith. The Catholic Church has so much to say about the profound suffering surrounding grief, yet we often do not make space for those who are grieving. So a little bit about Redbird Ministries. Child loss comes in many different stages and ages. So Redbird Ministries was founded to help families navigate the torrential waters of loss following pregnancy loss and miscarriage and stillbirth and afterbirth as an infant, child, adolescent, or adult. Redbird Ministries strives to be light for others. They exist solely to heal the wounded through the love of Christ, to assist them with their grief, and to honor the memory of the child they or others have lost. They give parents, friends, and families the tools, the support, and the training they need to overcome their suffering and pain and to move forward, mending a broken heart. St. Paul says, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. Okay, so Kelly, welcome. Thank you for being here with us. And
Thank you for inviting me, and it's an honor and a privilege to be with you all today. As Nicholas said, I'm coming from the Diocese of Lafayette, Louisiana. My husband and I, Ryan, started Redbird in 2018, so it's still considered a very new ministry. Neither one of us had ever worked for the church. We always considered ourselves, and still do, as ordinary families. So, when we talk about marriage and family life, and we look at the Bible and we look at our Lord, child loss has existed from the beginning. The first couple recorded in history, Adam and Eve, lost their son. And then Jesus at the crucifixion, the Blessed Mother lost her son. And it's just a profound, it's always like just, I guess, stumped me. It was a mystery to me as why grief ministry, especially losing a child, was not available in my own diocese. It always, and in largely in the church, like why hasn't that been part of the support that the church offers to families? Because it's been around since the beginning of time. And I'll share with you some of the things that we've uncovered. A lot of it has to do with cultural issues, just in how, in general, we experience just suffering in general. And for Ryan and I, it really damaged our marriage. I was 25 when we lost our first child. Our twins were born at 28 weeks. I'll show you some pictures of them in a minute when I share my screen. They were born at 28 weeks. My placenta abrupted. So our first pregnancy, I was a new mom, never been pregnant before, never had a baby before, and experienced a very traumatic delivery. And then ultimately lost our baby 15 days later. And his sister, she actually survived the NICU. So we spent almost 100 days in the NICU and then came home after that stay on oxygen and 10 different medicines. So as a new wife, new mother, um, came such a burden of that responsibility. I could not work. So we incur not only this like emotional and psychological experience of suffering, but there also was this financial impact. No one ever prepares you for a child to pass away, and we didn't have life insurance. So there was all these both I would say like these worldly things that we were suffering, um, just for not being like prepared for that experience. But there's also was of course like this faith crisis that we both endured. Um, for me, what when I describe my suffering, there was this desire for heaven that I had never had before. I thought like faith, it's kind of like a retirement plan. Like I'll get to that whenever I have time. But yet, at 25 years old, heaven was all I desired, but it was very disordered. And as God always does, he always uses vice to bring us to virtue. And he did that to me, but it took about 7 years for me to even realize that there was a real issue. And because people were not speaking truth over me and leading me through that process, a lot of it was left to my own demise. I had to figure this out. Um, I did all the traditional things that the world will tell you to do. I went to the therapist. I went to the secular groups. But I'm here to stand and share with you and say to you today that losing a child and trying to walk that walk without God and without faith, it'll never make sense to people. And you'll see people surviving grief instead of thriving once again. So Redbird exists to give people something different. We desire to walk with them in their darkness. Um, and although it's such a mystery that suffering can be so beautiful, we all know that in the Catholic faith, I feel like it's nothing new that we've discovered, but we've uncovered this treasure in the church that we wish to share to all these people who are really, really deeply broken and desiring something different for their life, a real purpose and a plan that God has for them. So that's kind of where our beginning kind of started, with this deep desire to help people. But then we were like, where do we go from here? There wasn't like a marriage prep that we could just like duplicate. There wasn't like youth ministry that we could duplicate. So everything that we've been doing has been building from scratch, um, which is beautiful, but it also is, of course, you guys know that it's hard to start anything completely from scratch. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share my screen. Let me see. Let me open my presentation, and then there we go. Okay. Okay. You guys can see that? Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm just going to keep going. So some of this stuff I've shared with you before. So we were fascinated by some of the findings when we were doing this research, because like what grief really does is you really feel like you're the only person in the world who's experienced this. It's very isolating. We experienced our loss before social media. So the lie of the enemy that you are the only one that feels this way, you're alone. It was very, very loud. But statistics say that over 25% of the population will experience the loss of a child. And most never get the support or help they need. That means 1 in 4 people that are sitting in our pews right now has experienced the loss of a child. And many of our pastors, although they would love to be able to walk and help, a lot of times they don't even know that a family has experienced a loss, especially if it's early loss. Many of the times there's not a funeral that the families even know that they can advocate for themselves. So a lot of times these people are just sitting in silence. Approximately 5% of the population will receive support from an expert to cope with the grief that they will experience. So a lot of times people will think, well, there are therapists that help people with this, but statistics say that only 5% will actually seek help from that. And that's one of those things that I was telling you about. That's a cultural issue. So that as the generations have developed, our younger generations now are more willing to go to therapy. But before, starting with the silent generation, they were meant to be seen and not heard. They raised baby boomers, who were just keeping up the Joneses. Then you have Gen X, which is me, um, which were a little bit more open to go to therapy, but therapists, you only went to therapists for big traumas. So that would be like sexual abuse, war, things like that. Grief was never considered any type of trauma. So there was still such a hesitance for people to do that. And then we're going into the millennial generation. So this is what I see as our families right now that are having babies. Millennials, and then what's the next one? Gen Z. So while millennials and Gen Zs are, of course, more willing to go to experts to receive help, a lot of them cannot financially afford to. So it still leaves whole world that's in really crisis of not receiving the support that they actually need from grief. So among the 5% of people who seek counseling, and this comes from Divine Mercy University, 67 are interested in discussing their faith, but less than 5% of counselors are capable of doing so. Disenfranchised grief. So this is like the only, when we talk about clinical codes, like when someone goes for counseling and they can actually get their insurance to pay for it. So that medical code that they need, the only code that the insurance will pay for is what we call disenfranchised grief. So what is that? So disenfranchised grief is when your grief doesn't fit in with the larger society's attitude about dealing with death and loss. The lack of support you get during your grieving process can also prolong your emotional pain. So disenfranchised grief accounts for about 4% of grief. So just in general, 4% of grief can be classified as disenfranchised grief. But in perinatal loss, it jumps to 60%, which also fascinated me because no one can clearly answer this, but I think we all know it's because our culture does not value life and honor its dignity. Many families do not consider their loss as a loss. I hear this over and over again. Our families who experience miscarriage will often share with me like they don't feel worthy to come to our grieving events, which also further complicates their healing process. So we try to change that narrative for those families because we know that when someone gets pregnant, when they bear life within their womb, that's an unrepeatable gift from God. And it's an eternal soul. And that relationship with that baby doesn't end with that loss. So perinatal loss refers to miscarriage, an ectopic pregnancy, having a stillborn child, or if they experience a neonatal death. What we experience with our young married couples, we do marriage prep as well in our diocese, is that many of them are very open to life. Like you'll see this. We had 2 of our couples that got pregnant on their honeymoon. And it's beautiful. Like this is what our church like wants to see, these young married couples open to life. But never do they ever expect or even put into their narrative as a young couple that their child could die. And that was part of my story. Like that thought never crossed my mind. And when that couple loses that first baby, because a lot of our families it's repeated loss, the fear of being pregnant again after loss leads a lot of our couples to consider contraception. And we've even walked with families after sterilization. We had one family, they have no living children. They had 3 miscarriages and took that as a sign from God that they were not meant to have children. So further complicating, of course, their grief. It's just a lot for them to carry. Losing a child accounts for about 70% of marriages that experience the loss of a child that will end in divorce about 5 to 10 years post-loss. Many of these couples, it's because they have not sought help. But one of the direct impacts of a couple losing a child is that men and women grieve so differently. Our men, what we call our St. Josephs, they want to go into the workshop. They put their grief into action. So they want to build things, tear down things, destroy things. My husband liked to cut the grass. Um, and women, we always say, like Mary, our Blessed Mother, women ponder this in their heart. They want to talk about it. They want to share with others, just like when Elizabeth and Mary, when Mary went to meet Elizabeth, they want to do life together. So that's why you'll see a lot of these small groups. Largely, there's a lot of them that mainly are women, because a lot of women want to talk about it. It's just fact. It's how God made us. So our solution, what we saw was that we needed to create spaces for them so that they can process their grief healthily. Divine Mercy University, when we were walking with them through, working with them through our framework for our Good Shepherd program, Dr. Harvey Payne, one of the things he shared with us is that grief is the natural response to death. So if they're going to process this, they're going to walk with it. So there's just, of course, there's a fork in the road. Are we going to do it in a healthy manner or unhealthy? Many of them, because they don't have the language that supports it or a supportive community, they will go down that negative path. So we step in, and that's where we help ordinary families carry extraordinary crosses. We partner with dioceses and parishes to provide Catholic programs, training, pathways to implementation, and ongoing formation. So what this does is to allow the church to mentor and serve families of child loss. When we first began in our diocese, there was, like I said, there was nothing that was authentically Catholic that we could just implement into our diocese or into our parish. And this frustrated me. And as Father McIntyre always tells me, he says, anger is energy. How are you going to direct it? Are you going to direct it in a positive manner or a negative? Well, God asked me to do this in a positive manner, and this is how Redbird was developed. I said it's how it's evolved. I said God was tired of me telling him that there's nothing, and he told me to go do it. So what we wanted to do was to create these programs so that when families are when the Holy Spirit asks families and they're chosen by God to walk with other families, that they have what they need to be able to love people. What I was spending all of my time on was creating the programs. So the very thing that God asked me to do, I didn't have time to do it because I was a wife, I was a mother, and I also was a real estate agent. So this was something I was doing on a volunteer basis. And that minimal amount of time that I had to serve in that capacity, I needed something that was given to me that I could trust, that I could implement, and just love the people that God sent me. So what Redbird is doing really is we're offering comprehensive and multifaceted Catholic grief support programs specific to child loss, which encompasses a model of evangelization, catechesis, and a company that before Redbird did not exist in the church today. And our programs are Catholic, of course, because of the critical role the church's sacraments play in conjunction with the other disciplines in our approach. So this is our timeline. So some of the big things that we are so proud of in 2021, we applied for the OSV Innovation Challenge out of 650 ministries. We made it all the way down to the finals and were awarded one of the three $100,000 grants. I cried because for such a long time, we've been advocating for families, and this kind of just was like God's little wink to us that, this really does matter. Like this work, it's going to make a difference in the church. So it was just beautiful. And out of that grant, we were able to create an app so you can download it on any platform. You just search Redbird Ministries. And we also were able to engage Divine Mercy University and begin developing our Good Shepherd program, which is for clergy. So priests, deacons, deacons' wives, And in phase 3, we're going to roll it out for parish staff, um, because we've identified through um, interviewing our pastors in our area that this is not something that they learn in seminary, and many of them really learn on the job training. Some of them, the first week that they are ordained, um, they're bearing people. Sometimes it is very traumatic experiences. We've had priests cry with us. We've had at our pilot workshop in September, we had like 3 deacons cry with us, just because, when you're not equipped to do something like that, but it's expected, like people are looking at you as to know what to say in the room. There's such a there's such a responsibility, and I know they don't take that lightly, but they're not equipped to be able to enter some of these very traumatic spaces with these families. So what we're hoping to do is to give them the language, give them the tools, give them the resources, but also now they have a place where they can send families. As before, that last encounter was almost like a good luck. I'm here, but there's nowhere where I can send you to. So it's a great it's going to be a great offering for our clergy. When we talk about competitors, this was something that we had to do with OSV, and I didn't really know if we'd ever use it again, but we use it in all of our presentations because a lot of times people will ask us, well, how are you compared to um, this ministry? And so we don't see ourselves as having any direct competitors because of everything that we offer. We are really trying to be innovative in the way that we reach people because, again, we have that space of grief, that conversation surrounding grief is not really comfortable. So it's a lot of times people even people that have relationships with one another don't feel comfortable of that first invitation, inviting someone to grief support. So we use secular strategies, marketing strategies to be able to bring our families into the ministry. So you'll see a lot of social media posts. We do a lot of that. That's why we developed our app to build trust with our families and build community amongst one another. So we really don't feel like we have any direct competitors.
After we lost Teresa, I wanted to express my grief in unhealthy ways, believing lies that no one understood. I just longed for support, and there just wasn't anything. The Grace from Redbird has been a safe space for my grief. I didn't know there was a grief support ministry for Catholics. And through Redbird, you see that there are people who care, people who want to be with you in your hurt, desiring to meet you where you are. And that has been the grace of Redbird.
St. John Paul the Great was known for his message of the new evangelization, the call for each of us to deepen our faith, believe in the gospel message, and go forth to proclaim the gospel to the lost, the broken, the doubtful, those who need healing from our Lord.
My name is John Miller, and this is my wife, Dana Miller, and we lost our son, Paul Vincent Miller.
Our leaders are fulfilling what St. John Paul the Great, Pope Francis, and our Lord refers to, leading and bringing healing opportunities to those who are suffering from child loss. The brightness of one's heart after losing someone they love, especially a child, is extraordinary.
It was just such a time of the guilt and the humility. And I remember Mama saying, why do you feel guilt and humility, baby? You didn't do anything. And I'm like, but I did. I blamed myself. As a woman and a mama, you just do.
And as a man, you basically look at him and say, don't feel that way.
After Talon died, my desire for heaven was intense. I wanted to get to heaven because my son was there. But there was just one thing. I was so mad at God. And because of that anger, I prevented myself from experiencing the real healing that God wanted for me and giving myself the opportunity for heaven. Grief ministry is a missing touch point of evangelization in the church. is when a person's heart is right for God. And if done well, it can make an impact on someone's life in such a profound way and follow them for the rest of their life. What our families need the most to begin their healing journey is witnesses, families walking hand in hand with other families, with God, modeling hope and healing that is also available for them too, helping families to open their hearts to what God has in store. And once trust is established, those families can walk with them to the foot of the cross and allow God to heal them. And then we partner with experts, our priests, our clergy, our Catholic therapists. Those families need experts. They need a community of people surrounding them to help them to heal.
Kelly shared with me what she had done in the first 2 years of Redbird's launch, a small ministry starting in Breaux, Louisiana, but that things were happening. I came from a banking background. I've spent 32 years in banking. And while I didn't have the child loss aspect of the ministry, I certainly could help them if they wanted to advance the ministry. We began with building a business plan. We went out and fundraised to be able to launch a broader approach to our ministry. And I'm so happy to say that in the 3 years that I've been involved, the ministry has just absolutely blown wide open.
Dr. Harvey Payne said, sometimes the letters behind one's name or degrees get in the way of opening hearts to healing. Peers have the authority to speak into the space of experience that oftentimes experts can't.
There were several signs of the Redbird. Thankfully, I was able to see that and recognize that. And I just called, and he was like, oh, I found someone that her strength is unbelievable. And every day it is work, but she's breathing, she's living, she's still living life and finding joy. And I see her laugh. Wow, she laughs. How do you laugh?
Pope Francis, in Spirit-filled Evangelizer, he says that God saves us as people, and his love extends to all. Rather than keep ourselves at arm's length, our Lord wants to touch human misery.
With technology that can reach people anywhere, we're able to bring them to us and help them heal. That's the beauty of this ministry.
The spiritual works of mercy have long been a part of the Christian tradition, just as Jesus attended to the spiritual well-being of those he ministered to. These spiritual works of mercy guide us to help our neighbor in their spiritual needs. We are all invited to take part of the fourth spiritual work of mercy, comforting the sorrowful. We must not leave bereavement work to the secular world for families to be invited into healing without God.
For years, I sat in the pews listening to John Paul's message of evangelization. And truthfully, I really didn't know what that meant for me. I didn't know how I was to go out and proclaim the gospel. That epiphany I've had through Redbird is that the ministry itself is evangelization. We are reaching people at the worst point in their life. We're helping them to heal. We're helping them in understanding their suffering, joining them in their suffering, and bringing them back to the sacraments and, of course, to Jesus.
We have the perfect opportunity to lead our families to healing with God and to help them grow in relationship with our Lord, where that deep and lasting healing actually happens at the foot of the cross.
I will stand behind Redbird forever. It really is incredible, the lives that I've seen change.
At least for me, just by opening up your heart, humbling yourself at the foot of the cross, believing that Jesus will guide you and protect you and carry you and your family through the hardest of times.
We see our leaders, who are largely families of loss, with a deep desire to bring the ministry to their communities, but they also are in need of their hearts to be cared for. The work is underway to identify content, guest speakers, workshops, and retreats in the future, an annual conference to form and educate our leaders so that they can serve in their community. Join us in this new evangelization in grief ministry. So some of the things that we oftentimes will ask our parish leaders and diocesan leaders to explore in their own communities is some fundamental things. One of the things that we uncovered was that some of our pastors didn't really understand what bereavement support really meant. The things that they would describe to us that they were doing for families, to me, sounded as funeral support. So that week of the funeral. But we all know that this is a cross that you have to carry for the rest of your life. So we're trying to help the church really understand what bereavement support really is. So part of that is also to we were also astonished that less than 5% of the church actually have budgeted money to provide grief ministry in their parish. And then also too, a lot of times, like we'll see that there are dioceses, and some of course are they're all different that we work with, but some of them do provide training for pastoral leaders to assist grieving parents and families, and some does not. So those are kind of some questions that, you know, as you're trying to consider if this is something that you want to bring to your community, if you have a space for those, and just kind of maybe ask yourself these things. The other thing that we often love to see our diocese is to have a comprehensive list of Catholic counselors. We know that's few and far between. Some communities do have a list. Some dioceses have a list. But we also, I was talking with the diocese yesterday, and they didn't have a list at all. So something that you want to make sure, because when someone is calling you, the two biggest things I've shared earlier with you that we see when we're directing people to counseling is on those very fundamental pro-life questions. Many of our families, if we don't send them to the right places, what we are sharing with them is in contradiction of what their therapist is sharing with them. So when we're trying to work with them in a crisis marriage and the therapist is not supporting that, that becomes a problem. Also, the same thing with contraception and sterilization. So we want to make sure that we have a good list to send someone to if they do contact you. We also like to give our families, like sometimes they're not ready to come in person, and that's fine. We have to be able to meet them with where they are at the time. We always say those that come in person, they're ready. And sometimes that might take a little time. Sometimes it might take years. We've served families. We had one family we walked with in Cleveland, the Diocese of Cleveland, in September. They came to our workshop. It had been 33 years since their son had passed away. I want to say he was about 18 months old when he passed away, and the mother for 30 years was an alcoholic, and she had been sober for 3 years and began to start working through some of the things. She'd numbed herself. So at any point in time we've had families that came to us a week after their child died. So right after the funeral to 30 and 40 years later. So wherever they are on their journey, we help them. And then also too, I know a lot of the pro-life offices will ask parishes to have an advocate in each parish. So even if you don't have a ministry in each parish, if you have someone that would just respond and advocate for that family, that is super helpful, because at least somebody knows in the parish that this family has experienced loss and is able to advocate on their behalf. So again, we talked about funeral support. A lot of our families that come to us, they all have different experiences. So we try to create resources that will help them through that. One of the resources that we're creating right now is called Eternally Loved, and it's a funeral support for parents of loss, and we'll be able to publish that a little later this year. And it came out of several of our families sharing with us that, you know, some of the things that had happened during their funeral preparation, because they're in trauma, they cannot properly think through some things, even if they're very faithful Catholics. They'll show up to their funeral and not pick anyone to bring up gifts. They won't pick people to read the readings. So we're creating like resources to help make that a little bit easier. And then encounters outside of encounters with Christ and support opportunities outside of Redbird, bringing Redbird fully in. Some things that you can do is having a separate mass outside of your annual pro-life mass, specific to the loss of the child. And if you ask your bishop to celebrate that, we just with statistics, 3 times people will come. And it's beautiful too. Bishop Kimmy in Wichita, he shared with Ron and I that at one point, when the families were going to light the candles, he said, I stood there, and he said, and family after family after family came up to light their candles. He said, at some point, I just went sit down. He said, and I was just watching. He was so moved. I think they had over 300 people attend that mass. And he never expected it to be so widely attended in his diocese. And during the homily, he shared with them that he was going to make this an annual event. So something as simple as just an opportunity for people to remember their child. Many of our families, they experience loss through pregnancy, they do not receive anything from the hospital with their child's name on it. So fact, didn't know this before our child died. If the baby is delivered with stillbirth, if the baby is dead before delivery, I should say that like that, they do not get a birth certificate or a death certificate, because in the state of Louisiana, for instance, I asked this question specifically here, but the reasoning behind it is it would be if they issued a birth certificate or a death certificate, it would be tied to a social security number. And so they're not allowed to be able to issue those. So for some of these families, they'll never see anything with their child's name on it or ever hear their child's name being spoken. So it's a beautiful way to support them. And then, of course, like if you do not have bereavement ministry, please send your families to our app. It's a great place to meet other couples and other, mothers of loss, fathers of loss. We have groups specific. We also offer a lot of virtual opportunities. During Lent, we have a Lenten book study that we're going to be offering virtually, and then some dioceses around are doing that in person as well too. But if we do offer that virtually, and then we're also launching some professional groups that'll take place starting in February and March. One of those is our pilot group, which is called Remember. So it'll be our first resource that we are piloting outside of the child loss spectrum. So it'll be for loss to suicide, and that is going to be offered virtually. We have a Marian sister that helped us to write that program, as well as contribution from Dr. Greg Bataro and Father Chris Alar. So it's going to be a beautiful resource for families. The way that we group our families in our child loss, we group them according to age. So with Remember, they'll be grouped according to relationship. So they'll still be amongst their peers to help with healthy dialogue. And then some other resources that we're going to launch, that's in March, is called the School of Grief. So that's going to be presented by professional experts. And it's really psychoeducation tied to learning more about grief. So a lot of the struggles with families who are grieving is that they don't understand what's happening to them. Many of them feel like they're going crazy when it's just grief. And when you can normalize that process and help them to walk through that healthily, a lot of our families do a lot better. So we're going to help them to, by education and walking with that in a healthy manner. So that'll start up in March. And then, of course, if you're interested, we do offer chapters and flocks. We help our leaders, train leaders in different communities to be able to offer the support to families in their communities. I know we have about 18 minutes left, so some of the stuff I'm going to go through quickly, because a lot of this, if you're interested in more, we can have a conversation a little bit deeper. But this is actually not accurate. We have about 15 national and 2 international dioceses, and we have, I think it's 12 national flocks that are operating within their diocese as support within their community. and 3 international flocks right now. That's kind of where our support is. It's so cool too, because Zoom is allowing us to reach so many people. So our spiritual director, she does spiritual direction with, she has one mom she's doing in Australia, and I think one in Nigeria right now. So even though like support is not available in their communities, we're still able to reach them and help them walk through that. Of course, we've got the blessing from our USCCB, and we're listed in the Kennedy directory. And I think we're the only grief support ministry in there, as I last checked. But also Redbird 2, of course, fits nicely in the call to the joy of love, which is the framework for marriage and family life that was introduced in June of 2021. It was in a response to Amoris Laetitia. So we fit in 3.3.3, which is accompanying couples who have lost a family member, especially a child. And this is just a statement, like parishes and dioceses, every day we hear that they want to offer support, but they don't even know where to begin. And so one of the things that we work with our dioceses and our parishes is implementing a 3-year framework to kind of launch what we've done in our own diocese. What we have created today in our own community, it took us 6 years to do. So we never start our parishes and our dioceses with the full gamut of all the resources, because we know that's overwhelming to people who are volunteering. So we start with usually a mass of remembrance. If they're already doing that, we offer to help them plan their first couples workshop. And it's beautiful. We do a 3-week onboarding with our new leaders. Redbird trains them, so it's not a responsibility of the diocese. And then we also help them to plan those first events. So it's really helpful when they have a peer and a team that helps them support, because whenever I was doing this, it was me and Ryan and like one other person. So it gets very overwhelming when you're the only one doing this in your community. Now we have about 30 leaders that they help us. Like at any point I can call. So it naturally grew, but it took that first step. It takes a little bit to get that organic growth. So again, we always share as the church, we should not leave families of loss to make sense of death in the secular world, nor should we allow these families to carry this cross alone. Our 4 engagements are our programs, our online community, support groups, and our mentors. So we really pride ourselves in helping to have all those 4 touches to our families, because it provides a real holistic, comprehensive place for families to heal. And of course, like we shared with you before, that we're casting our nets deep. Many of our families who come to our support, when we ask them where they've saw us, it's either Facebook or Instagram, or a lot of them have heard our meditations on Hallow. So again, we're casting our nets wide to help bring people in to the ministry. And ultimately what we do is we lead them back to the church, back to the foot of the cross. The sacraments are where our families ultimately heal, but sometimes they cannot do that on their own. They have to be helped and walked with. A couple years ago, I had one mom that I was walking with, and every time she would show up to go to confession, she would feel overwhelmed, like an overwhelming feeling that she could not, she would walk out of line. She could never go. So after the 3rd or 4th time this happened to her, I made her meet me at my church parish that has noon mass on Fridays. And I literally held her and walked with her and waited in line with her and encouraged her. And she went, and then I went right after her. So modeling that to families, not just saying this is what you need to do, because that doesn't work. It's showing people how to do it that works. From the launch of the ministry, we've welcomed over 107,000 visits, 77,000 unique visitors, and received over 221,000 page views. So this was from July of 2023. It's increased. I haven't updated this slide. a lot more people are consuming our content in a digital capacity, but it's not less than, because I feel like people are still encountering truth through the messages that we are sharing. This just helps to build trust for them to come in person. These are our 3 pathways. So how they could come into the ministry, either through the institution, so offerings that you guys would put on through family and friends, and also through that digital component. That's why it's so big. A lot of them come through there. And then we have 2 key programs that are not, we don't allow them to be facilitated virtually or outside of the church. Whenever my husband and I lost our child, we did not go to church for about 4 years. I was having flashbacks to the coffins at our church parish, and we live in a very, very small town. We have 8,800 people that live here. So St. Bernard Church is the church where everybody goes to. And a lot of times I will tell our pastors, like, Father, like, in these small country rural places, the Catholic Church is reduced to St. Bernard Catholic Church. Never crossed my mind to go somewhere else. That's where my husband was baptized. That's where he made all his sacraments. That's where we were married. That's where our children were. Their funerals were. That's where they're buried. It's our home. And many of our couples say the same thing. So these programs we want them to be in the places that will bring people back to church. So that's our hope. And then all the other things that we offer, of course, can be held in, like, the book studies can be held in people's homes, or they can be done virtually, but those 2 resources are done in parishes. We also just released our book. Bishop Kimmy endorsed it, The Grief of Dads. It was published by Ave Maria Press. And this is exclusively for our fathers. They grieve so differently than us women. And so we wanted to provide a resource that spoke to exactly what they needed. So it's a really beautiful resource. And it's not just for dads of loss. There's a letter to pastors, so a priest, or a deacon can read it. There's a letter to their wives, for women to understand what they're going through and to help them carry their cross. And then also too, like, there's letters from clinicians. There's a bunch of beautiful resources in there. It's a great book. And then also too, we have other offerings that we're working on. Our Good Shepherd phase 1, our workshops developed. We have 2 other phases that we're going to come out with probably this year. We have a podcast. So many offerings. Okay, let me see. I got 10 minutes left, so let me get all the way to the end. All of these are just really testimonies. That you guys can kind of read while you're watching back. We've just had great impact from different families. So as we train our leaders, they go back and they touch and impact their own communities. So kind of how Jesus's model, what he did with the 12, they were able to convert the whole world. We're hoping to duplicate ourselves so that more families can be impacted. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing here, and I will provide, Nicholas, I'll provide you this slideshow so that people can see it. But I'm going to open the floor to questions because I know we only have a couple minutes left.
Sounds good. Does anybody have a question for Kelly? And I can email the slides out to those who registered. Thank you, Kelly, for this great presentation.
You're welcome.
What kind of costs would be associated for the parish level?
So it's $2.99 for a subscription for a leader, and it gives them access to all of the intellectual property that surrounds the programs. We've created like flyer templates for them, so making it really easy, just editable templates for them. PowerPoint presentations, all the videos, all of that. So it's $2.99 a year for a parish.
So let's say a family wants to get involved. Would they contact you directly, or do they need to contact you through their parish or diocese? do you offer ministry like directly to families from Louisiana? I guess through the app and website and everything.
Yeah, so we have been contacted every type of way. So directly from a family advocating for their own self or for their community. We've, of course, parish leaders, diocesan leaders, priests, counselors. We'll meet with anybody who's wants more information. So they can just contact us directly on our website.
Hi, Kelly. Just a question regarding a diocese. What do you offer as far as starting out in a diocese?
Yeah, so our diocese, for a diocesan advocate, that cost is $5.99, and we walk with the diocese through their strategic plan. They get access to the same leader portal with access to all the intellectual property and all that. We also, both parish and diocesan level, they get onboarding as a leader and the training and one-on-one. Basically, like we meet with them as they need. And then as you guys are, what usually happens after that first offering, you'll have more people that will want to come in after they've been served. And so then we would work with them the same way as we'd work with the diocese. We don't see the ministry, we don't see the need of having a ministry at every single parish. What we would like to see is to have a chapter in at least every deanery, because families will fly for one event, but when we're talking about these like week-long book studies, that's whenever you really come into a problem where people won't drive. Going from Lafayette to Breaux Bridge, where I live, it's literally 6 miles, and people complain about driving 6 miles. So does that answer your question? And I can send you guys, Ashley actually put together all the packets, Nicholas, for everyone who registered to send to them. But they didn't go out with the ice storm because our office was closed. But you guys will receive that in the mail for everybody that registered, except for our international friends. We can send that digitally to you. You're welcome.
Okay, thank you so much, Kelly. Does anyone else have a question about Redbird Ministries or how it works, or
I was wondering if for Europe would have to involve a bishop directly in it and ask, and it might be a bit of a lengthy process, because this would imply probably like a council meeting and voting and yeah.
It's always
And I
hard to
think
do it on the diocesan level. It always is, but we'll work with you with however. A lot of times it's easier when the parish comes to us first, but we have several international dioceses that we have right now. So Christchurch, New Zealand, we just implemented them the third part of last year, and right now we're currently implementing Saskatoon, Canada. So we have the ability to do that.
it's so amazing that you actually do that. I think it's so important. Maybe it's a question of different culture. Europeans, it's quite a taboo subject. Women might talk about it, men never, ever. They're always the strongest beings on earth. And it does end up in very strange reactions. As you said, 5, 10 years later, why would it hit them 10 years later? But it does. It really does. At some point, it does hit them. And especially, at least for us, what I notice in the Catholic world, it's even worse sometimes. They have even more kind of internal restrictions of talking, as if it was something bad, as if it was something that God punished them with. And it's very strange to actually open the subject and reach them and um really open up somehow. It's easier for pagans to talk about it and to open up about their feelings on this, and any kind of almost like negative and hurt feelings. Catholics, they always want to be happy and joyful and we're saved and everything is fine, but it's not.
No.
Families explode like 10-15 years later. And I might overshare, but I found out in my late 20s that actually even my mother lost 2 children before us. I was like, what? I have 2 little brothers. And I was like so happy. Wow, we would have been 4. And mom said, no, you would not have been here if they lived. Okay.
There is that reality too, huh?
So
Yeah,
yeah, it's a very strange reality that my existence is actually my great grandbrother's death is a cause of my existence in a way. I have to thank them for existing in a way. But it's very strange how it's such a taboo subject and how repercussions like that in time really they're real.
absolutely. I think we were a better church whenever what is that memento, like when we remembered our death, people don't want to talk about death at all. And it's like I always say, I use the word fascinating a lot because it's just not Christian. Because like when you think about it, it's like we talk about it from the beginning, like how sin and death entered the world. And it was, it was the fall of man. And that like, oh, if death was not so terrible, then Jesus would have not had to die and conquer it, So it's like, oh, it's like a mystery of why the church does not explore that with families, like that concept more. And like I said, I think it's just the way the culture has evolved. Yeah, definitely. But I do think, and maybe just the maybe either the Eastern world, is that how you say it? Because we're the Western world. I see now though, like we were at a meeting last week, a mandatory parent meeting at our school, and our athletic director shared his timeline of after graduation. They were speaking on how the school prepared them for their next life. And he actually mentioned in a room full of people their loss. So I really do feel like that the younger generations who are having children now are more willing to talk about it than the older generation. It's also too fascinating, like the silent and the baby boomers. Like one of the things when you research like psychology, how they look at these subjects, taboo, like therapy and all that. One of the things that it said was that they're fascinated why people would call themselves depressed and have anxiety. It's because they were never raised in a generation where they were able to talk about these things. And so they were told not to. And so, it's going to take a whole long time to make this culture shift. But you'll see too, like you said, the pagans, it's almost too like when people don't talk about something or they don't do something for a long time, then it goes to the other extreme. It's whereas like we as the church have to help people to keep that healthy middle. So providing that space to do that in a very healthy way, to talk about it, not over spiritualized, not over what is the other way, over paganized or whatever. Like you want to be in that healthy middle, because it really is. There's scientific data. If people talk about suffering or journal, like when they get it out, the somatic part of their brain, people actually do better.
I was also very happy to see that you have a special book for men. Women, we talk, we get it all. We exercise the pain by talking. But in men, it gives this, as you said, like violence, a lot of violence, which they cannot see where it comes from. And we sometimes forget about them somehow, or we think they tough everything up and, it does, or we think it doesn't affect them. We think they're so tough that it actually doesn't affect them, but it affects them a lot.
It does. My husband,
And
he would cry to work the entire time to work and the entire time home. And then he would put on either his husband hat or his work hat, because he'd have to turn it off. And he
till he
would,
explodes, eventually implodes eventually. And I don't know others, but I think one of the most important thing in a family is the man's mental health, which we don't really, we care of the mother, of the child, and the father is just like, bring food. But it's not as that simple, and we ignore a bit the man's mental health and what it does to generations to come, how it perpetuates to, it's transmitted to their own children somehow in the education or unresolved anger. And I'm really glad there's something for men. It's a very feminine subject in a way, the loss of a child, but I'm really really glad that there's something especially for men. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you
Oh,
so much. It was
welcome.
really, really, we're far, at least in my diocese. Priests would be absolutely terrified if I opened the subject. But I'm so, so glad. They don't even in the family ministry, they don't have women.
Yeah.
Would you
They're a
happen
bit dangerous women in my diocese. And they have just men and priests. And yeah.
Joanna, would the materials have to be translated into your local language in order for it to be effective, or do you think like Redbird Ministry?
Yes, definitely, yes. Yeah, but that would not be really a problem. That's, yeah, that would be easy to do. It's just the mentality would be very difficult to change, but little by little, I think, little by little. It's just like talking about it and you know, opening up casually in a conversation that, this exists.
Yeah.
Um,
There's still too, like here, I know like some people will come to our support, grief support stuff, whatever, if it's a workshop or a book study or what, they'll come to it and they'll tell other people like by word of mouth that it did help them, but they'll never share that in public. So there still is
yeah.
this like, shame that, oh, I needed help. Which that's just going to take time, and some of it too is personality. Like for me, like I share with everybody, there was just this immaturity. I was 25 years old. I mean, I was young. I also did not have a mature spiritual life at the time. I had like it was super immature. So that all those factors in those families, they all play a key role into how the family will accept that cross, walk with that cross, and accept help. All of that has, plays a big role in that.
And live with it, like they accept it every day as a reality, not just
Mhm.
hide it somewhere and it never happened to us, or we live as if nothing happened. No, 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 no. No,
Yeah.
doesn't work like that. Yeah.
In the
So
church,
thank you so much.
you're welcome.
Sorry.
Yeah, and I was gonna say in the church, like we always tell everybody we're Easter people, but like Good Friday did happen. And sometimes we spend a lot of time on Holy Saturday before we get to Easter Sunday. So like just remembering that Paschal mystery, how that was a process too, that we all have that in our own personal lives, that you can't skip to Easter Sunday. Like it doesn't help people.
Mm.
Okay, well, I think we are out of time. Thank you so much for
Welcome.
being here, everybody. Thank you, Kelly, for your presentation and for sharing with us. I hope this is helpful for those who came and also for those who might watch the recording later to learn about Redbird Ministries. But I encourage you, if you want to learn more, to go to Redbird Ministry website, which I think I have it, yeah, here in the chat. And then also, Kelly, I don't know if you want to share your email or how people should contact you just through the website or.
Yeah, it's really simple. Kelly, Kelly at redbird.love, LOVE.
Okay.
And then also too on the website, you can schedule a call directly there underneath leader. I think it says leaders at the top, and schedule a call.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and sign off here. I wanted to send the invitation for next month. I hope you can join us for the next TOB Educator webinar. We're going to hear from Life Giving Wounds Ministry, which is a ministry for adult children of divorce. So if their parents have been divorced, it's a retreat program, and they also offer support groups for adult children whose parents are divorced. So please join us the third Friday of February for that webinar, if you would like to, with their president or founder, Daniel Mayola, if I pronounce his name right. So anyway, have a good weekend, and thank you all for coming today. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks so much.